On our way home from shopping, my 8-year-old daughter suddenly grabbed my hand. "Mom, quick into the bathroom." She dragged me into a stall and locked the door. I asked, "What's going on?" She whispered, "Shh, don't move. Look." She peered under the door. I followed her gaze and froze in fear. On a pleasant Saturday afternoon with the warm autumn sunshine, Rachel Miller held hands with her 8-year-old daughter Emma as they headed to their usual supermarket. The weekends, when she was freed from the busy weekdays of working as a nurse, were precious time for the mother and daughter. "Mom, let's have spaghetti today," Emma suggested from the passenger seat. "With tomato sauce." "Again?" "We just made that the other day," Rachel replied with a wry smile. "Let's try something different for once." "But didn't you say Daddy liked tomato sauce spaghetti the best?" Rachel's chest tightened. 2 years ago, after losing her husband David in a car accident, Emma would sometimes bring up her late father like this. In her own 8-year-old way, she was probably trying to cherish her father's memory. "That's right, Daddy certainly did love tomato sauce," Rachel answered gently. "Well then, shall we make Daddy's favorite spaghetti today?" Emma's face lit up immediately. "Yay, and let's buy basil too, like the kind Daddy used to grow in the garden." When they parked in the supermarket parking lot, Emma jumped out of the car energetically. Rachel followed behind her, relieved by her daughter's liveliness. Right after losing her husband, there was a period when Emma had been withdrawn too. However, children's resilience is remarkable, and now she had regained her former brightness. Inside the store, Emma was happily selecting ingredients while pushing the cart. "Mom, I have a math test at school tomorrow," Emma suddenly said. "Really? Will you be okay?" "Yeah, I'm already perfect at it. But Grandma keeps asking, isn't studying difficult?" "It's weird." Rachel stopped what she was doing. Her mother-in-law Helen had been showing unusual interest in Emma's schoolwork lately. She had heard the words "maybe Rachel is too busy with work to help Emma with her studies properly" many times. "Grandma is just worried about you," Rachel answered with carefully chosen words, but inwardly she felt something wasn't right. Emma tilted her head. "But Mom helps me with my homework properly. Grandma is acting kind of strange." When they got home, they began preparing spaghetti in the kitchen. Emma finished her homework and then helped her mother. While peeling tomatoes in hot water, Rachel was lost in memories with her husband. David was good at cooking and often stood together with her in the kitchen on weekends. "Mom, are you lonely?" Emma suddenly asked. "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering." "But it's okay. Emma is here." Rachel hugged her daughter. It was certainly difficult to balance work and child-rearing. After 12-hour shifts at the hospital, managing housework and childcare was both physically and mentally demanding. However, it was also true that she could keep going because Emma was there. "Thank you, Emma. Mom is truly happy to have you here." While eating dinner, Emma cheerfully talked about what happened at school, about her friends, her teacher, next week's presentation. Rachel listened to these stories while wishing this peaceful time could continue forever. After dinner, while the two were watching TV, the doorbell rang. Looking at the clock, it was 6:30. "I wonder who that could be." When Rachel opened the door, her brother-in-law Michael was standing there. He had a small bouquet in his hands. "Good evening, Rachel. How are you?" "Michael, what brings you here?" "My divorce went through, and being alone is lonely." "I wanted to see you too," Michael said with a bitter smile. "Uncle." Emma ran over. Michael picked up Emma. "Emma, you've gotten so big. I bought this for you." When he opened the small package he handed her, it contained a stuffed animal of Emma's favorite character. Emma was delighted, but Rachel felt a bit confused. She felt uncomfortable that Michael knew Emma's preferences in such detail. That night, after putting Emma to bed, Rachel sat alone drinking coffee and thinking. She knew about Michael's divorce, but she had been sensing something unnatural about his recent behavior. However, she could understand the sadness of losing family. Perhaps he was seeking a new place to belong in his own way. However, what bothered her was that he knew Emma's preferences in detail. When and where had he obtained such information? Michael's visits became frequent after that. As if it were scheduled, the doorbell would ring every day around 6 o'clock. It was the time when Rachel came home from the hospital and was preparing dinner with Emma. "He's here again," Emma sighed softly. After 3 weeks had passed, signs of fatigue began to show in her daughter's expression. "Emma, how was school today?" Michael would ask the same way every time. He always had some kind of gift in his hands. Sometimes candy, sometimes stationery, sometimes new clothes. It was okay, Emma no longer showed the excitement she used to. Michael didn't seem to mind and sat down on the living room sofa. "Since the divorce, I've been really lonely. It's such a help having you two here." Rachel had mixed feelings. She couldn't be cold to her brother-in-law, but honestly, the daily visits were becoming a burden. After coming home tired from work, she also wanted to spend family time alone. "Michael, if you come too frequently, we're busy too," Rachel decided to say one day. "Oh, you're right. Sorry," Michael apologized. but he appeared again at the same time the next day. Today is special. Can I watch Emma practice for her presentation? Rachel was surprised. Practice for her presentation? How do you know about that? Emma told me about it the other day, didn't she? Michael answered as if it were obvious. However, Rachel had no memory of this. She had heard about the presentation from Emma, but she didn't remember that conversation happening in front of Michael. Emma was also tilting her head in confusion. It's next Thursday, right? Starting at 2 in the afternoon, Michael continued. Can I come watch? Now Rachel was puzzled. She hadn't told anyone the detailed date and time of the presentation. The letter from school should still be in her room. Where did you get that information? I heard it from Emma. Right, Emma? Emma looked up at her mother anxiously. Did I say something like that? That night, after putting Emma to bed, Rachel was thinking about her brother-in-law. Michael was certainly kind and treated Emma well. However, she couldn't stop worrying about him having information he shouldn't know. The next week, Michael appeared at the presentation as promised. When she saw him sitting among the other parents in the parents section, Rachel felt complicated emotions. If David were there, he would have been sitting in that seat. After the presentation, Michael handed Emma a small bouquet. That was a wonderful presentation, Emma. Thank you, Uncle, Emma answered politely, but her smile wasn't as bright as before. In the car on the way home, Emma murmured, Mom, I get tired when Uncle comes. Why? It feels like I'm always being watched, and he knows all the things I like, but I don't remember teaching him. Anxiety spread through Rachel's chest. Emma's intuition was sharp. The discomfort felt by an 8-year-old child must have a reason. That weekend, when Michael visited as usual, Rachel observed carefully. She noticed him walking around the living room, picking up picture frames, and looking at Emma's school supplies. Emma, are you looking forward to next month's field trip? Michael suddenly said. Rachel gasped. The field trip story was in a handout that had just been distributed from school yesterday. She hadn't even talked to Emma about it in detail yet. Field trip? Emma was also confused. Oh, you're going to the zoo, right? Making lunchboxes will be hard work, Rachel. Michael. Rachel's voice trembled. How do you know that? Michael's expression stiffened. Well, from Emma. I haven't heard about the field trip yet, Emma said in a small voice. Silence fell. Michael laughed awkwardly. Oh, that's right. I must have been mistaken. Maybe I heard it from someone else. However, that explanation was unnatural. From whom else could he have heard about Emma's class field trip information? After Michael left, Rachel checked the drawer of Emma's study desk. The place where school handouts should be kept seemed to be subtly organized. It felt different from the state she had last seen it in. Emma, did you organize your desk drawers recently? No. Mom always says clean up, but I haven't done it, Emma answered honestly. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. There were too many inexplicable points about Michael's behavior. Knowing Emma's preferences, being aware of school event details, and today's field trip matter. It was too unnatural to be coincidental. The next day, when Michael was leaving, Rachel witnessed from the second-floor window him peering intently into the house through the living room window. His gaze seemed to be examining the inside of the house as if confirming something. Mom, Uncle is weird, isn't he? Emma quietly approached. Why do you think so? He always asks when we're going out, right? Like, do you have work tomorrow, or are you going somewhere on Saturday? Why does he want to know so much? Emma's observation was accurate. Michael certainly had a tendency to want to know Rachel's schedule in detail. At first, she thought he was being considerate, but thinking about it now, it was unnatural. Maybe Uncle isn't just lonely, but has some other reason. Emma's words changed Rachel's anxiety into certainty. On Thursday of that week, Michael suddenly made a proposal. Rachel, could you let me make a spare key? A spare key? For emergencies. If something happens to you, I'm worried about Emma. As family, I feel responsible. Rachel immediately declined. Thank you, but it's not necessary. If something happens, I'll ask the neighbor lady. But wouldn't blood-related family be more reassuring? Michael persisted. David would want me to take care of things too. Being told this using her late husband's name, Rachel felt angry. Michael, I appreciate your feelings, but I decline. At that moment, Emma murmured in a small voice, Uncle, you're kind of scary. Michael's expression changed for an instant. However, he immediately put on a smile and answered, Scary? Uncle just wants to protect you, Emma. But Emma hid behind her mother. Her child's instinct seemed to sense something dangerous. On Sunday afternoon, Rachel and Emma were at a shopping mall downtown. They needed to buy new clothes to match Emma's growth, and Rachel wanted to spend time alone with her daughter away from Michael's frequent visits. Mom, this blue dress is cute. Emma came out of the fitting room and twirled around to show it. It looks wonderful on you. Shall we get that one? Rachel felt her heart warm seeing her daughter's innocent smile for the first time in a while. Recently, Emma's expression tended to cloud when Michael came. The two moved from the women's clothing section to the children's clothing section, choosing socks and underwear together. When their shopping bags became heavy, Emma said I'm thirsty, so they ordered iced tea at the food court. Today is fun, Emma said happily. When Uncle isn't here, we can relax like this. Rachel's heart ached at her daughter's words. She felt sorry for creating a situation where an 8-year-old child had to feel such things. Emma, do you dislike Uncle? Emma thought for a moment before answering. I don't dislike him, but I think he's weird. He always asks about us, and he comes even when Mom isn't home, right? He comes when Mom isn't home. Rachel was surprised. When? Last Wednesday. When I came home from school, Uncle was in front of our house. He asked, "Isn't Mom home yet?" Rachel's spine went cold. Wednesday was a late shift, and she was at the hospital until 9 in the evening. Emma was staying with Mrs. Johnson next door, but Michael shouldn't have known that. So what did you do? I told him I was at Mrs. Johnson's, and he said I see and went home. But I wonder why he came. Rachel's heart was beating fast. What was Michael trying to do? Coming when no one was home meant he must have had some other purpose. Mom, are you okay? Your face is pale. I'm just a little tired. Shall we go home now? The two headed toward the mall exit with their shopping bags. It was Sunday, so it was crowded with families. Children's bright voices echoed as they walked, when suddenly Emma's feet stopped. Mom. Emma's voice was shaking. What's wrong? When Rachel turned around, her daughter's face had gone completely pale. That person. Emma pointed in a direction with a small gesture. Looking toward where she pointed, they could see the back of a man beyond the food court. However, with so many people, they couldn't see clearly. Which person? Emma gripped Rachel's hand tightly. Mom, this is bad. Quick, let's go to the bathroom right now. Emma, calm down. What's wrong? Please, right now. There was urgency in Emma's voice. Her daughter's behavior was so abnormal that Rachel hurriedly took Emma's hand and headed to the nearest restroom. She looked around but couldn't see anything particularly dangerous. However, Emma's trembling wouldn't stop. At the entrance to the restroom, Emma stopped again. Mom, come in with me. It's okay, Emma. This is a safe place. No. I don't want to unless we go together. Emma clung to her mother's arm. Rachel had no choice but to enter a stall with her daughter. Emma quickly locked the door and put her index finger to her lips toward Rachel. Don't move. Look. Emma crouched on the floor and quietly peeked outside through the gap under the door. Rachel also crouched down like her daughter and looked outside the same way. At first, she couldn't see anything. But after a while, she could see men's leather shoes. Black leather shoes were slowly walking around inside the restroom. The leather shoes stopped in front of each stall, as if checking what was inside. Rachel's heart was beating violently. Why was a man in the ladies' room? That's strange. They could hear a small voice talking on a cell phone. They should have headed this way. Rachel gasped. The man was looking for someone. And the target might be them. Yes, that's right. A mother and daughter. The child is about 8 years old. Emma gripped her mother's hand tightly. The two were frozen with fear. They were carrying shopping bags. It looks like they bought a blue dress. Rachel's blood drained from her face. He was talking about exactly them. The blue dress was what Emma had just bought. The leather shoes started moving again. This time, they passed more carefully in front of each stall. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. Yes, I understand. I'll wait a little longer. The man hung up the phone. At that moment, someone entered the stall next to them. It was the sound of a normal woman's footsteps. The man's leather shoes moved hastily. Excuse me, the man's voice could be heard. I'm a cleaning staff member. I'll be finished soon. That's a lie, Rachel intuited. If he were a cleaning staff member, he should be wearing a uniform, and female staff should clean the women's restroom. After a while, the sound of the leather shoes moved away. However, Emma and Rachel still couldn't move. Mom, I'm scared, Emma said in a trembling voice. It's okay. He seems to have left. Rachel hugged her daughter. But Emma, how did you know it was dangerous? I've seen that person before, Emma answered in a small voice. I saw him near school the other day. He was taking pictures of you and me. Rachel's whole body shook. Someone had been monitoring them. And today, they had followed them to the shopping mall. Emma, you noticed well. Thank you. But why would someone take pictures of us? Is he a bad person? Rachel couldn't answer. However, what she could say for certain was that this wasn't a coincidence. Someone was intentionally tracking them. She took out her cell phone and called 911. However, the police officer who answered said, there hasn't been any actual damage, and didn't take it very seriously. But a man entered the women's restroom and was looking for us. He was a cleaning staff member, right? It might be a misunderstanding. Rachel gave up and hung up the phone. If the police wouldn't take it seriously, she would have to handle it herself. Mom, what should we do? First, let's get out of here safely. Then let's think about why this is happening. The two carefully left the restroom. The man was no longer visible. However, Rachel continued to feel eyes on her back. When Rachel and Emma rushed into the shopping mall security office, the security guard initially received them with skepticism. However, when Emma specifically described the man's characteristics and Rachel played back part of the conversation she had recorded on her cell phone, the security guard's expression changed. That is certainly suspicious. Let's check the security cameras. 30 minutes later, the man was found inside the building. He was a middle-aged man in a black suit, holding a small camera. When the security guard questioned him, the man presented a private investigator's license. "My name is James Harrison. I'm here on investigative business." "Investigative business? What kind of investigation?" the security guard interrogated. "I can't tell you that due to confidentiality obligations." The security guard called the police, and a patrol car arrived 20 minutes later. The man was to be taken to the police station, but at that moment Rachel's cell phone rang. It was from Michael. "Rachel, are you okay? I heard something happened." "Michael? How do you know?" "I saw it on the news. They said a suspicious person was caught at the mall. I thought it might be you and got worried." Rachel was confused. It hadn't even been an hour since the incident occurred. It wasn't a big enough incident to make the news. "So how did Michael know?" "I'm coming to pick you up now." "Where are you?" "At the police station. But I have my own car, so I'm fine." "No, I'm worried. I'm coming right away." Michael hung up unilaterally. Rachel waited with Emma at the police station, feeling anxious. The police interrogation began. Private investigator James Harrison initially refused to reveal his client's name. However, when told there were legal issues with entering the women's restroom, he finally spoke. "I was hired by a woman named Helen Miller." Rachel gasped. It was her mother-in-law's name. "What investigation were you asked to do?" the detective questioned. "To record Rachel Miller's daily life. Specifically, I was told to investigate the child rearing situation." "What kind of content?" "Whether the mother is properly taking care of the child. Whether the child is being neglected because she's too busy with work. Things like that." Rachel stood up. "What does that mean?" Harrison answered apologetically. "Mrs. Miller seemed to believe that you are unfit to raise the child alone. She said she wanted to gather evidence to obtain custody." Rachel felt like her world was collapsing. Her mother-in-law was aiming for custody of her granddaughter. At that moment, Michael rushed into the police station. "Rachel, Emma, are you okay, Uncle?" Emma ran toward Michael. Michael hugged Emma while approaching Rachel. "What on earth happened?" The detective explained the situation to Michael. When Michael heard the private investigator's story, his face went pale. "Mother did? No way, she wouldn't do such a thing." "Michael, didn't you know?" Rachel asked. "I had no idea." "I can't believe it." Michael held his head. That mother would go so far. However, the detective's expression was suspicious. "Mr. Miller, you've also been visiting Rachel's house frequently recently." "That's because I was worried about my sister-in-law." "Worried? What specifically were you worried about?" Michael was at a loss for words. At that moment, Emma suddenly spoke up. "Ah. I've seen this person at Grandma's house." Everyone looked at Emma. Her daughter was pointing at the private investigator. "Emma, where did you see him?" the detective asked gently. "About 2 weeks ago, I think. When I went to Grandma's house, this person was there. He was talking with Grandma about something." Rachel was stunned. The fact that her mother-in-law had met directly with the private investigator meant it was planned. The detective questioned Harrison again. "How many times did you meet with Mrs. Miller?" "3 times. When I first received the request for an interim report, and when I received additional instructions." "What were the additional instructions?" "To gather more detailed evidence. She told me not only to take photos but also to record conversations." Rachel couldn't stop trembling. Their entire daily life had been monitored. "Also," Harrison continued, "she told me to have her son cooperate as well." Everyone's gaze turned to Michael. "Son? You mean me?" "Yes, Mrs. Miller said her son was investigating the family situation from the inside." Michael's face turned bright red. "That's not true. I wasn't asked by my mother to do anything like that." However, the detective's pursuit continued. "Then why were you frequently visiting Rachel's house? Why did you know detailed information about Emma's school events?" "That's..." Michael showed a confused expression. "It's true that my mother would ask me about how you were doing. But I was just worried." "Worried?" "I thought it would be difficult for Rachel to raise a child alone. I was hoping there was something I could help with. But asking to make a spare key..." Michael fell silent. After a while, he finally spoke. "Actually, my mother had asked me to. She said, in case something happens to Emma. But I didn't know my mother's real purpose." The detective brought a file from another room. "These are materials seized from Harrison's office." The file contained a large number of photos of Rachel and Emma shopping, picking up from school, playing in the park. Everything had been recorded. Furthermore, a contract with Helen was discovered. It clearly stated evidence collection for obtaining custody of granddaughter. "Mother was seriously trying to get custody of Emma," Michael said in a despairing voice. "Was I being used?" Rachel looked at Michael. There was genuine surprise and regret in his eyes. Michael, did you really not know? Please believe me, Rachel. I didn't know about my mother's plan. I was just worried about you. Michael's voice was shaking. It's true that my mother asked me about how you were doing, and I answered without thinking. But I never imagined it would be used for something like this. The detective explained to Rachel. Mrs. Miller was trying to gather evidence that you're too busy with work to properly care for your child. She was also preparing evidence that she would be suitable as a guardian. Evidence? Economic stability, safe living environment, interest in education, etc. Everything is documented. Rachel was stunned. Her mother-in-law had made a detailed plan to take away her granddaughter. And Michael had been made to cooperate without knowing. Mom, why would Grandma do such a thing? Emma asked anxiously. Rachel hugged her daughter while answering. Grandma was so worried about Emma that she did something wrong. However, anger was welling up in her heart. She absolutely could not forgive someone trying to steal her beloved daughter. Helen Miller appeared at the police station the next day. She admitted all the facts, but when asked for her reasons, she answered while shedding tears. Emma is my precious granddaughter. After losing my son, Emma was the only hope I had to live. Helen's voice was trembling. I thought the burden was too great for Rachel to raise her alone. I could provide a better environment. However, that means taking a child away from her mother, the prosecutor pointed out sternly. Taking away. I just wished for Emma's happiness. The court issued a restraining order preventing Helen from approaching Rachel and Emma. She was also given a fine for trespassing and invasion of privacy. Helen was forced to live in a distant facility. A week after the incident, Michael visited Rachel's house. Unlike before, he timidly rang the doorbell. Rachel, can we talk for a bit? Sitting face to face in the living room, heavy silence flowed between them. Emma was doing homework in her room. I really didn't know, Michael began. I never imagined my mother was making such plans. But it's a fact that you were giving information about us, isn't it? That's right. When my mother asked about how you were doing, I ended up answering without thinking. When she asked things like, is Emma doing well? Is she enjoying school? I thought my mother was worried as a grandmother. Michael clasped his hands and sighed deeply. Actually, I was worried about you too. After losing David, it seemed like you were shouldering everything alone. I thought maybe there was something I could help with, so I started visiting frequently. Is that all? Rachel looked at him with suspicion. Michael blushed. To be honest, that's not all. I was attracted to you. But you're my brother's wife, and you were still grieving, so I couldn't express those feelings. Rachel was surprised. She hadn't noticed Michael's feelings at all. So, my feelings of wanting to support you as family mixed with personal emotions, and as a result, I ended up being used in my mother's plan. Michael laughed self-deprecatingly. I was really foolish. Emma came down the stairs. Uncle, are you talking with Mom? Emma, I'm really sorry for making you have scary experiences because of me. Michael knelt in front of her daughter. Emma thought for a moment before answering. Uncle isn't a bad person, right? You were just tricked by Grandma, weren't you? That's right. But that's no excuse. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. Emma took Michael's hand. But if Uncle hadn't been there, it might have been scarier. Because Uncle was coming, we could notice there was a strange person. Tears welled up in Michael's eyes. Emma, thank you. Over the following months, Michael carefully maintained distance while rebuilding his relationship with Rachel and Emma. This time, without being influenced by his mother, he began to interact purely as family. Rachel also gradually came to trust Michael. She sensed his sincerity and genuine love for Emma. Michael began to naturally share Rachel's burdens without forcing anything. A year later in spring, Rachel and Michael had a quiet wedding ceremony. Emma served as a bridesmaid, and the small church was filled with a warm atmosphere. Mom, are you happy? Emma asked after the ceremony. Very happy. Thanks to Emma, I was able to find a real family. I'm happy too. I wonder if Daddy is watching from heaven. I'm sure he's watching, and I think he's happy that we're happy. Michael picked up Emma. I'm going to be your new daddy, but I'll never forget about Daddy David. I love both Michael Daddy and David Daddy. Far away in the facility, Helen would sometimes gaze out the window and think about her granddaughter. She could only quietly accept the tragedy caused by her distorted love. Rachel learned that true family is not bound by blood ties, but by hearts that care for and protect each other. The future walking with her new family would surely be bright.